What is going on, guys? Joey Franzel here at Flex Training Systems. Today we're going to talk about how to find your squat stance. That's going to include your shoes, your footing, how wide you need to be, whatever. There's a couple things in here that I don't think people talk about too much, which I think can be useful to you guys. Let me just adjust my volume real quick because it's loud for me. Anyway, because we are powerlifters and we do compete, in obviously powerlifting competitions, everybody has to hit depth. So I like to base finding your squat stance on that, right? You want to adjust your width, your stance, your shoes, whatever, so that you can hit comp depth. That is the most important thing, obviously, because it doesn't matter how much you lift. If you're not hitting depth, it's not going to count. But you want to find a stance width that allows you to do this. And I think you should, initially start out in flats. I mean, I have two different takes on this, and there's not really a way for you to do it. You can start out in flats. Start like shoulder width, and then with your toes angled out slightly, and then you're gonna gradually move your stance width out until you kind of find the point where you're squatting to competition depth, but you're just barely hitting it, right? Like it's definitive, like, okay, I'm definitely hitting depth, but you don't want to overly do it. One, because I mean, a theme across all of your lifts should be control. And the more range of motion you're going to have to travel, and the farther deep into the hole you go, you're going to just lose control of the weights, right? I mean, if any of you have squatted with excessive depth, I'm sure, the lower you go, you're just going to be like, oh crap, like I'm losing power, right? The reason why I say start out in flats is because squatting in flats, you're going to use obviously you want to keep everything over mid feet. You need to adjust your stance so that you can do that. Keep everything centered over midfoot, and you want to hit your comp depth. That's going to give you really good control over the bar. That's going to allow you to use right here. Make sure you're using a little bit of everything or whatever you're built for. The reason why I say that last part is because I once upon a time inherited this guy named John Hack, and this guy, he did not squat low bar. He squatted high bar, and it was more of like a mid bar, and I looked at him and I was like, you know what? Low bar does not make sense for you. I think we're just going to stay with high bar. That is a very rare case. There are very, very few people that can squat and stay that upright with like just no hips, just literally all quad action. Extremely few people that can do that, but there are going to be those cases where some people are going to be a little bit better with high bar. It's rare. Most people are going to be better low bar. But when you are just so supremely quad dominant, you want to use that. If you're very well rounded, you can hit everything. I would definitely think low bar is going to be better. You're going to use the inside of your leg more, your glutes, your quads are involved as well, but it's not the same. All right, so you want to like, for example, if you're going too wide in your squat, you're just going to have no power. You're going to have no pop. You're not using, you're not recruiting enough muscle to help you move the most amount of weight, right? So, I mean, you got to kind of experiment with that down here in the bottom. Everybody's going to be different. That's why it's so risky to just look at people online and be like, yo, I'm going to copy this guy, because, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, it may not pan out for you how it did for them. Coming back up here, you want to use as much ROM as you need to hit competition depth, but not much more, for the reason I demonstrated or talked about earlier. It's all about control, right? You don't need to be going super deep. Also, you do not want to consciously stop at legal depth, okay? So if you can squat deeper, but you're like mentally trying to like stop yourself around where you think depth is at, that's just a recipe for disaster. You're going to be super inconsistent. You eventually want to get to a point where, if I just squat down till I feel a ton of tension and come up, I know that I'm going to be at competition depth. Because at the end of the day, the point is, we want to get to this point right here. Everything should lead towards hitting competition depth without even thinking about it. Every single thing that I do, in any sport, whether powerlifting, anything that you see any great athlete, the thing that they do is going to become second nature, right? So You want to have ingrained that technique, hitting that proper competition depth, maintaining that weight over midfoot, controlling the bar, all of that through repetition, through your training, just over time, it's going to become second nature. You want to make a habit of doing things the right way. So I will never forget, when you go out there onto the platform and there's an audience in front of you and there's cameras and there's lights, like the Arnold, for example. My first Arnold ever, I was like, all right, there's a lot of people watching me, right? Granted, I had done a bigger meet before that, like the LA Fit Expo, and there was a lot of people, and for whatever reason, it didn't bother me. I think it was because of the Arnold. There were lights in my face, and it was just like, I don't know, it really made me. And you're at level with everybody, right? Like the platform is level with you, and you guys are gonna hopefully get a chance to experience something like that. When emotions or external factors come into play, you want to ingrain just that perfect technique. So when you get under the bar, as soon as I step on the platform and I put my hands on the bar, everything that happens until I rack the weight is like I am not even thinking. And sometimes after I complete the squat, like when I hit my, I had 750 last meet, 744 the meet before that. When I think about it, it's like, yeah, I remember doing it, but in the moment I don't even like. It's like I don't even remember it happening. I just remember saying I'm going to commit to squatting this weight and hope that I come up, and it happened. I'll never forget my first Raw Nationals. I actually lost my phone, and right before I went out for my squat, my opening squat, it was like maybe it might have been my second attempt. I don't remember. I couldn't find my phone, so I'm telling Tina, I'm like, Tina, I don't know where my phone is. I didn't even care about my squat at the moment. I'm like, what fuck? What did I do with my phone? So I was all discombobulated, but because I had my technique that I could fall back on, I was still able to pull it out. She luckily was able to track down the cleaning person of the bathroom, find my phone, and return it to me. Shout out to Tina coming through. But I was emotionally distraught and flustered in the moment. But because I had ingrained hitting competition depth, and all my cues and making it second nature, I was able to, come out on top despite all the emotions that I was feeling, right? Coming down to this point right here, recovery and overlap with the deadlift. So this one is a little bit more complicated, and you can be a victim of this and you don't even know it, right? Let's say you squat, with a mid stance, maybe, shoulder width, which we'll call like 1.0 stance, or just outside shoulder width. You can call it 1.5, right? Whatever. You have your comp squat, and that goes great. But you pull sumo, with a similar stance, right? Or maybe your low bar squats, supremely fatigue your back, and you pull conventional and it kind of interferes. But you have a really, really, really good consistent deadlift, right? Your deadlift makes up the bulk of your total, whatever. It might be worth it to adjust your squat stance to have less overlap with your deadlift, if your deadlift is it's the bulk of your total, or you believe that your deadlift is something that needs to be a priority, right? So you might squat with the heel, you might squat with something that you're maybe not as powerful on because you have so much overlap with your deadlift. Now that is one way to go about it, but you could also just dose training correctly to be able to hit everything. Maybe you need to alternate, like some weeks you deadlift, some weeks you don't. Maybe you just need to have like, you start everything out super, super low and you're slowly adding more over time. Slowly adding in more over time to be able to tolerate everything, but you just gotta, consider that, right? I'm not saying you need to change your stance all the time for that. It might be your deadlift. You might say, you know what? Like for me, for example, my competition squat is like a big chunk of my total and my deadlift is not. I could probably, if I was only deadlifting, I would probably do sumo, but because my combo, I have a nice synergy between my comp squat and my conventional deadlift, I choose to do them that way, right? You're almost picking the lesser of two evils in that sense, and it's also a method of injury prevention. If you're somebody that overshoots, or you get, your technique isn't the best, or you're prone to getting hurt because you just have like, a good amount of rounding when you deadlift or whatever, then it might be more beneficial for you to um, adjust your squats, or do them maybe less frequently, or you just have to take everything into consideration, right? Like, yes, we're trying to find our squat stance and things like that, but but we're doing powerlifting, right? We're doing all 3 lifts. So if we're squatting, like, man, I feel really good squatting with the super narrow stance, but my conventional deadlift, that is really, really, it's really, really good. It's like, you pull a million pounds or whatever, it's getting torched by me doing this. Then you might want to widen your stance out a little bit so you can just kind of like even things out a little bit. You're not, just annihilating muscles over one plane of motion, if that makes sense. I hope I'm making sense here. Just keep in mind when you are finding your squat stance that you might have a deadlift stance that will just absolutely tank your squat if you overdo it. So you need to keep that in mind. And it's going to make staying in the pocket even, so much more important. So coming down to the end here, you want to only add heels and make changes when needed. And when you're doing these things, you want to experiment, right? So try heels, try flats, play with different stance widths. Try to. So what are you looking for? Is the bar staying over midfoot? Am I using a good? Am I feel like I'm using, I'm using my hips, my back, my legs, my quads, everything, or am I really only using my quads, or am I really only using my hips, whatever, right? Some people that squat like a taco, you might not be able to use flats. I mean, you can use flats, but your depth, it might be iffy, and there's just no quads, right? You're just not getting your quads involved, so it might be beneficial for you to get a little bit deeper, with the heel and get some quad action in there, changing the angle and adding the heel, right? So you gotta experiment. But while you're experimenting, especially for you younger lifters, you need to understand that you have to temper expectations, because if you can squat 500 pounds, in flats, and you suddenly put on heels, and now you're only hitting 460, and you're letting that affect you emotionally because you're like, shit, man, like my squat sucks, I'm trash, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna gain ground when you're constantly changing things. Commit to one thing and then give that thing time, and then you'll get there. If you guys know, shout out to Amanda. She, in the beginning, she liked to experiment with like her footwear a lot, and I would really get on her about, I want you to stay in one thing, right? I remember when we were transitioning to flats, we were like flats, and then she wasn't feeling it one day, maybe she'll try heels, whatever. But then we eventually committed to the flats, and now like her depth with flats is great. If you guys look at her last meet, breaking records, blowing things up. And sometimes we just, like I said, it's normal to feel emotional when you're gonna have like an expectation that is involuntary. You just feel that you need to be a certain way. So the other side of you, that rational side, needs to kind of say, hey, calm down, we're experimenting right now, we're going through an adjustment period, let's commit to this, and then that'll blow up. I am going to use football as an example here. If we look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they got a new team, they got a new quarterback, we got AB coming in late, right? They're a little bumpy to start the season. I think Tom Brady may have played one of the worst games of his entire career earlier this season, right? I think it was against the Saints. It was really bad. It was not a good day for me. But they were a new team. They're making changes. Things are coming in. Things are coming out. We had like no off season, Corona, all this stuff, right? And then as the season went on, you got the boys together. You guys learn the offense. You guys get time to prepare. You get better as the season goes. You beat some teams that beat you during the season really, really bad, right? And then you get those 2 weeks of preparation with the same guys. You guys know your lineup, running the same offense, all that stuff. And then Super Bowl happens, and boom, everybody plays great. They win the Super Bowl. So it's the same thing. Humans, we need to adjust to things to get better at them. That's how we survive. That's how we, move forward. I hope this made sense. I know I have a little bit of a different take on things, but that's how I like to do it. It's worked well for me. I mindlessly built up a 750 squat doing, trying to make sure that I was hitting all these things. And, yeah, I hope that was useful. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, let me get a hashtag squat big in the comments down below, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. All right.